Today is Saturday, June 6th, 2026, and today is National Yo-Yo Day, which feels appropriate because a yo-yo is basically a toy that spends its entire existence going away from you and then immediately coming back. Honestly, that's a pretty impressive business model. And oddly enough, today's stories all involve movement. People moving around a growing city, kids chasing baseballs around a field, and an asteroid moving through space while humanity collectively keeps an eye on it just in case. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who keeps finding historical stories that sound completely fake until you realize they actually happened. On June 6, 1892, Chicago's famous elevated railway system, the L, began operation. And one thing I love about old transportation stories is how often they sound completely normal today and completely absurd at the time. Because cities were growing rapidly. Horse-drawn traffic clogged streets. Pedestrians competed for space. Moving people efficiently was becoming a serious problem. So Chicago's solution was essentially, what if we put the railroad above everything? And somehow, that worked. The elevated trains became one of the defining features of the city. They rattled above the streets, wove between buildings, created entire new views of urban life. And that's what fascinates me, is that transportation systems quietly shape how people experience a place. When people think about Chicago today, many of them picture the L. Not because it's flashy, but because millions of lives have been organized around it for more than a century. It's one of those inventions that becomes almost invisible because it works so well. And honestly, that's often the highest compliment an infrastructure project can receive. People stop noticing it entirely. And speaking of things becoming bigger than anyone originally expected, June 6th also gave us a sporting event that started incredibly small. On June 6, 1939, the first Little League baseball game was played in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And if you had watched that game, you probably wouldn't have thought you were witnessing the beginning of an international institution. It was just kids playing baseball. But that's often how important traditions begin. Not with fanfare, not with giant crowds. Just somebody trying an idea. Little League was created because Carl Stotts wanted younger children to have a structured version of the game. Simple enough. But what fascinates me is how quickly the idea spread. Because it wasn't really about baseball. It was about community. Parents showing up. Kids learning teamwork. Neighborhoods gathering around a field. And over time, those local games became part of childhood for millions of people. One thing I kept thinking about while reading this story was how many adults can still vividly remember details from youth sports decades later. The uniforms, the coaches, the fields, the wins, the losses. The memories often last much longer than the scores, which is probably a good reminder that some institutions succeed because of what happens around the activity. Not just because of the activity itself. And then sometimes instead of looking around the neighborhood, humans look into space and briefly wonder whether something very large might be heading our way. On June 6, 2002, astronomers and news organizations were closely following a near-Earth asteroid that passed safely by our planet after attracting significant public attention. Now, to be clear, the asteroid wasn't actually on a collision course. But that didn't stop people from paying attention. Because few phrases capture human curiosity quite like large object flying through space near Earth. And honestly, that's understandable. For most of human history, people didn't even know asteroids existed. Then suddenly modern science starts identifying giant rocks moving through the solar system at extraordinary speeds. And now we track them routinely. What fascinates me is how dramatically our perspective has changed. Ancient civilizations looked up and saw a mystery. Modern civilization looks up and starts calculating trajectories. Scientists today monitor thousands of near-Earth objects. Most are completely harmless. But every once in a while, one passes close enough to remind everyone that Earth is not isolated. We're moving through a busy solar system. And honestly, I think part of the public fascination comes from the scale. An asteroid doesn't care about politics, or trends, or deadlines. It's a reminder that we're all riding around the sun together on the same planet, which somehow feels both comforting and slightly unsettling. And after spending today's episode around cities, communities, and things that occasionally keep people awake at night, it feels appropriate to end with someone who made a career out of keeping people awake at night. Born on June 6, 1947, in Glendale, California, Robert Englund became one of the most recognizable faces in horror history. Or, more accurately, one of the most recognizable faces hidden under makeup. Because Englund is best known for portraying Freddy Krueger. And what makes that achievement fascinating is that horror villains rarely become cultural icons. Most characters appear in a film and disappear. Freddy didn't. Partly because Englund brought something unusual to the role. Humor, charm, personality. A strange sense of theatrical fun. Freddy was frightening, but he was also memorable, quotable, distinctive. And over time, the character became one of the defining features of 1980s horror culture. One thing I found interesting while reading about Englund was how different he seems from the character that he made famous. By most accounts, he's thoughtful, friendly, and deeply appreciative of fans. Which honestly feels like a reoccurring theme in entertainment. The people who play monsters are often surprisingly pleasant. Something I kept circling back to while working through June 6 was how much of history involves humans trying to navigate larger worlds. Cities become larger. Communities grow. Knowledge expands. And our awareness of the universe keeps stretching farther outward. The Chicago L helped people move through a growing city. Little League helped generations of kids find their place in a community. Astronomers help people understand their place in a solar system. Different scales, same basic goal. Figuring out a way where we fit. Anyway, that was today's strange little walk through history. And before I leave you alone with your thoughts, here's today's quote. Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Carl Sagan. If you'd like to hear more of my work, narration, podcasts, or other projects, you can find it all at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and thanks for wandering through history with me for a while. I'll see you tomorrow.